Good day everyone! In our last video we built our new server rack and briefly showed you the new case for the KingTech server. For years the KingTech server has been running in a mineral oil cooled environment, and while this worked perfectly, in our new office we opted for an ordinary server rack. Since we have a very short server rack, finding server cases that fit is quite a challenge. Luckily we managed to find this one over here. Before we could start building the server, however, we had to disassemble our previous one, but as the components in a mineral oil cooled server are submerged in the oil, everything was very greasy. Hence, we had to clean all the components. How we did that? Well, we took a rather unconventional approach. First of all, do not try this at home. Well, not with your own hardware anyway. I do this because I'm an idiot. After putting everything in a dishwasher, we laid the components on a bed of rice for about a week. This should absorb all the moisture, but even then we noticed there was some water in the power button on the power supply. Stubborn as we were, we plugged the thing in anyway and bang! Fortunately, the other hardware survived and looks as good as new. So, what did we learn from this? Always bring a camera. Anyway, let's take a look at the new case, shall we? We bought this case at Junkrat Service Systems, but I guess if you look for the product ID you might be able to find a local dealer. Our main reason for picking this case is its ability to fit standard ATX motherboards and 120mm fans. That last one is interesting since we have a custom water cooling loop laying around with a 120mm radiator we can use. And there are not many server cases of this size that fit standard ATX motherboards. As you can see, the server opens very easily, though I must admit I already removed the screws on the sides of the latch for the previous video. I don't think I will put these screws back in, since I like the ease with which it opens now. If I pick up the case so I can show you the front of it, and I will also try to edit in a picture somewhere, we will find 3 5¼ inch bays. Next to that we have 4 3½ inch bays for hard drives, and finally we find our 120mm fan. Behind the fan there are more storage bays, but I don't think we will use those. So let's open this baby up even more to show you what is inside. So, now we have removed all the screws, I can show you the front panel a bit better. Let's see if I can get this thing out. There we go. Yes. As you can see, we have a USB 3 and a USB 2 port. And on the other side we find a power and reset button. Nothing strange so far. Then we have indicators for the power, hard drive and 3 network adapters. And there's also a system error LED. But since we work with consumer hardware for this build, we will probably not be able to use these. Let's take a look at the trays next. By pressing a little lever in the case, we can pull the trays out the front of the case. In our 3½ inch base we have space for both 3½ inch and 2½ inch drives. The server has 4 of these bays, and we will be installing our regular hard drives in here. But since this is all plain steel, I'm guessing this will be a very loud server. Next to our 3½ inch trays, we find our slightly bigger 5¼ inch trays. These can be replaced for example, front panels or disk drives. But they also house mounting holes for additional hard drives. We can remove this mounting mechanism so we can clip them onto a front panel or disk drive. And now we see a very clever design to house as much drives as possible. We can not only mount two 2.5 inch drives side by side, but since these trays are quite high, they also consist of two separate levels. This way each tray can fit up to 4 2.5 inch drives or two 3.5 inch drives. And finally we arrive at the cooling of the case. This case comes with a pre-installed 120mm fan, which is not controllable, and two 60mm fans in the back, which actually are controllable. The 120mm fan is attached to the actual drive cage of this case. This way your hard drives are actively cooled, which improves their life expectancy. However, I still have an old 120mm radiator laying around, so the plan is to replace the drive cage for the radiator in order to water cool the server. We will also replace the fan with one we can control, because as you can see this one is directly connected to the Molex power. I also think we have a front panel with a small fan controller laying around to control the lot. Our intent is to reuse as much of the old server as possible, but keep in mind that our server is quite old. So for this build we have a simple AM3 motherboard with 4 slots of RAM. In our previous server this meant 16 gigs, which is plenty for its purpose, which mainly is running home automation, running some tools for our website and 1 or 2 small game servers. As for our CPU, the old server features an AMD 955. This is a Phenom 2 4-core CPU with a clock speed of 3200 MHz. Remember that back then 4 cores also meant 4 threads, but we managed to salvage an AMD 1090T, which is a Phenom 2 6-core CPU with a turbo clock of 3.6 MHz. So we hope to get a slight upgrade in CPU performance. What was immediately clear when opening this case was that a full ATX motherboard would never fit it. Unfortunately, after much trying, and trust me, we did try, our micro ATX motherboard also would not fit. Eventually we gave up and ordered a second-hand mini ATX motherboard, which caused us to lose 2 RAM slots and thus half our RAM. When taking a second glance at the website, we also noted there is a remark about the ATX sizes that will fit the case. So that's why you always read the fine print. Now we have that sorted out and scavenged some more old components we had laying around, we can finally start building our system. So far the server is coming along pretty well, and as you have seen, most of the work is in the water cooling of the server. I know what you're going to ask. Why would you water cool a server? Well, first of all, views, and we had these components laying around anyway. Another reason is that server cases usually have these small whiny fans, which you want to run at an as low rate as possible to reduce the noise. True, water-cooled pumps, especially these old ones, also make a lot of noise, but not as much as these two fans. But the main reason is that we thought it was a neat thing to do. Let's finish this thing up and look at the result.
One eternity later.
Finally, after way too much time, we created the most shabby Junker server ever. We upgraded the CPU, but had to downgrade the RAM. The water cooling and Sky Gamma 3 front panel we salvaged allowed us to minimize the sound, but as you can hear, the server is still quite noisy. The front panel not only features a fan controller, but also a small display to show readings from two temperature sensors and the RPM of the fans. After some weeks of testing without the two rear fans, the server keeps a steady temperature of 34.5 degrees. As you can hear, when I turn the two rear fans to max, the server starts making a lot more noise. I'm happy it is able to keep a steady temperature with only the 120mm fans for the water cooler. Furthermore, the server features 4 front USB ports and a 2.5-inch hot swap bay. This is useful for taking backups. Unfortunately, the motherboard does not allow us to use our USB 3 ports, so that's a clear flaw. We still have 2 eSATA ports, but I'm personally not a big fan of that. What I love most about the server is the water cooling reservoir in the front. It's quite the eye catcher, though I wish it was black, but For our operating system, we tried to install vSphere. This way we could add this server as a spare resource to our VM cluster when we build our new server later this year. But unfortunately, the motherboard we use is not being supported by vSphere, and thus we settled for a simple Ubuntu installation and run most of our applications using Docker. Come to think of it, most of our misery is due to our motherboard. Maybe I'll replace it later. For now, I feel like this video has been going on for way too long. So I say goodbye for now, and hopefully I will see you for the next video. See ya!